Consider that.
I know. We're breaking new grounds. Hello. It is Wednesday, September 2nd, 2020, 7:01 p.m. on the East Coast. My name is Ethan. As always, we like to let you all come in and get situated and say hello and let us know you're here and tell us where you're from. We have two really awesome guests this evening, Ali and Maya from Hard Quirk. So I'm really excited to talk to them and talk to you. So, hey, it's Morgan or Molly or both. We don't know. But hey, probably, if I'm guessing, it's Molly.
Awesome.
Incidentally, a shout out to Molly for coming in second place in trivia last week,
Nice.
which was really impressive. Yep. So please say hello. Let us know where you're from. We start in a couple minutes. So let us know you're here. How are you, Molly? There's Deirdre. Hi, Deirdre. I hope you're doing well. We need like intro music. I don't know why I'm just realizing that now. Yeah, I think so.
We'll, like, put together some jazz.
Marianne, we're here.
Maybe we should.
I think that Marianne is here.
She can beatbox for us.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be awesome. We should have like a user-generated playlist from people who, just like people submit songs. I think they're really awesome.
That would be amazing.
Heck. Hi, Kristen. And yeah, we're doing well. How are you doing, Deirdre? Hi, Don. Good to see you. Kristen, where are you in Texas?
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Houston.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Are you from there?
I'm from Texas.
Cool.
Yeah.
And there's Katie from the bike. Hi, Katie from the bike. She's my girlfriend. She's biking. She's on her she's training. She does all the athletics in the family. I don't.
Right. It's relatable.
So hope she burns the calories for me. It's a really good fit. So anyway, let's get rolling. It's 2 minutes after Plano. I know Plano. Dave says hello, Ethan and company. So as always, my name is Ethan. Welcome to the OCD Town Hall. Today is on innovative advocacy with special guest Hard Quirk.
Ethan, I think your connection might be a little choppy here. Or it could be ours, yeah. Okay. So we're having some issues with our wonderful host connection. I think he did this on purpose. He really just wants to put us on the spot. So if you guys just bear with us, I'm sure he'll be back in just a second. And our tech expert is actually working on that right now. Okay, great. Well, since we're here and since you guys are here, we don't want to keep you waiting unnecessarily. Why don't we just talk a little bit about who we are and kind of what we're doing here with Hard Quirk. And as soon as Ethan pops back on, hopefully soon, then we can be interrupted and kind of move forward with what he was planning for the evening. So my name's Allie. I am one of the co-founders of Hard Quirk. This is my other co-founder, Maya Fatahi. I do have firsthand lived experience of life-disrupting OCD. I've also been to residential treatment for about 3 months in order to recover. I've struggled a lot with different subtypes of OCD, kind of like a mishmash. Ethan, are you back?
I always feel like that's a great way to start the program, don't you?
Yeah, we did. I actually was like, I think he did this on purpose.
Really helps things.
I did. I totally did. Sorry about that. I don't want to interrupt. You're probably saying something really interesting, so go ahead.
No, we were just kind of telling our normal life story spiel. So, yeah, I can wrap that up. So, yeah, I've struggled a lot with a lot of different subtypes, especially emotional and physical contamination. I've struggled a lot with health anxiety, perfectionism, just right OCD, honestly, kind of you name it. And I have had some experience with it, definitely scrupulosity. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I'm 26 years old. I'm currently in Boston, Massachusetts. Actually decided to move here after treatment. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I'll let Maya introduce herself.
I'm Maya. Let's see. I never know what to say.
Where to begin?
So I also have firsthand lived experience of life-disrupting OCD. I've struggled since I was about 8 years old with symptoms that started out primarily with sexual obsessions and sexual intrusive thoughts. I've also dealt with a lot of perfectionism and social anxiety. So this is a big ERP for me today. I definitely made a shout out to my therapists earlier and asked them to come see all the hard work being put to work.
Yeah.
Just make sure they don't charge you, because anytime. Yeah.
It's expensive.
It is indeed. Yeah. When I met Allie in residential treatment, we came up with the idea for Hard Quirk there, and it's been a work in progress since.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you all will hear much more about it later.
So yeah, oh my God, my flow's all off. I don't know what to do. This is great. Now they're on the left and not. It's also confusing. Anyway, yeah. So sorry about that. Actually, I think I was in the middle of saying that Allie's on the left, and Maya's on the left and Allie's on the right. But regardless, I think everybody now knows where everybody is. So I think they gave some brief bios. Let me just go through the immediate housekeeping, and then we can jump right back into where they were. So as always, my name is Ethan. I'm the International Ambassador for the International OCD Foundation. Let me just read over just the quick housekeeping notes. This town hall is intended to serve as educational content. It is not intended for therapy. For treatment-related questions, please be sure to work with your local provider or contact a local clinician. The International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline and should not be used if you are in distress or feel unsafe. If you are in a crisis or you ever feel feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room, call 911, or call the Suicide Prevention Hotline at 800-273-8255. On that note, also September is Suicide Prevention Month. We were just talking about that, and I'll let the girls talk about something in a minute that they're doing. But just some statistics. So we lose over 800,000 people per year to suicide. It's the 10th biggest cause of death in the world. Two of the leading factors of that contribute to suicide is isolation and feeling like a burden. Speaking up when suicidal isn't attention seeking, it is seeking help. And having mental health issues doesn't make you weak, as we always talk about. I know you two are working on something as well with Suicide Prevention Month. If you wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that Molly from Not Alone Notes is here, because she's actually one of the other advocates that we are going to be working with. So an account called OCD Cafe on Instagram has put together kind of a giveaway of sorts, but it's a group giveaway. So there is us and then about 7 other advocacy accounts. And we're going to actually be doing a giveaway where I know that Hard Quirk is providing a t-shirt, some stickers, a mug, that kind of thing. And that is going to be starting, I believe, next week. So just definitely stay tuned to our Instagram for more details about how you can enter that. Definitely, we understand that suicide is such an important issue, particularly with OCD, right? So that's something that we always want to acknowledge and emphasize.
Absolutely. So thank you. So do you still want me to read your bios, or do you think we're covered in that area? Because I'm so excited to dive in with you, but I can read them. I don't want to put them to waste. You wrote them.
Yeah, go for it.
Sure, why not?
Okay. Oh boy. So just some quick info on Maya and Allie. Maya is obviously a co-founder of Hard Quirk. She's 23 years old. She's originally again, I think somewhere right here we talked about it, and currently lives in the Boston area while working on her undergraduate studies in psychology and art therapy. If you want to check out her art, you should go to her website. It's really beautifully done. She has firsthand lived experience of life disrupting OCD. It's interesting, ladies, because I've talked about OCD disrupting life and really making it hard to function. But I kind of like the term disrupting OCD. I don't know if I've heard it before I'd talk to you, and I really like that because it encompasses so much, and it really it encapsulates so much of the disorder without saying, oh, I wasn't functioning, or it's it's life disrupting, right? And it can be really on any scale, right? That's what makes the D in disorder. It's like when the functioning stops. So just rambling here. And a lengthy journey through the mental health care system that has inspired her advocacy work. She struggled with significant OCD symptoms since she was 8 years old, primarily sexual obsessions and sexual intrusive images, along with perfectionism and social anxiety. It was not diagnosed until she was 12 years later, at 20 years old, when she's already been through several years of treatment tailored toward a coexisting eating disorder and major depression. Building Hard Quirk has allowed her the opportunity to use her art and creativity for advocacy, but above all, to be the vulnerable, authentic, validating, and empowering figure for other young people struggling with unrecognized OCD and someone that she needed. So thank you, Maya.
Thanks for sharing that.
It's weird, right? It's weird to like turn your pain into your purpose and be like, I mean, nobody should have to go through that stuff. But when you start to flip it, it really becomes a source of strength, your own journey and your experience. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I've learned so much through my journey, however hard it has been. And, you know, I can use all that I've learned to put that towards helping others go through it easier than I did.
Yeah. Deirdre wrote art therapy, Leslie College, ?
Yes, Leslie. Now it's called Leslie University, but yes.
Is that just so they can charge you more? No, I'm kidding. Anyway, so yeah, probably. So Allie, obviously, is also co-founder of Hard Quirk and someone has lived experience with severe OCD. She's had intrusive thoughts for years, but nothing so dangerous or life-threatening as till she was at college at UNC Chapel Hill. OCD came on very suddenly, particularly with chemical and drug contamination and losing control of her body. It started with chemicals, health anxiety, restricting food, to the extent that weight loss became rapid and uncontrollable, and the illness became dangerous by the fall of 2018. I cut some here because I wanted you to tell it yourself, Ali. But she suffered for about 2 years before being hospitalized in an eating disorder facility before getting the appropriate diagnosis, and was later transferred to a residential treatment facility for OCD in Boston. She was no longer functioning by the time she arrived. After 3 months of hospitalization, she discharged in January of 2020, which is really not that long ago, ready to leap back into her life with passion and determination. She founded Hard Quirk in March of 2020. She loves to write and create artwork in the form of music and sketching portraits. She's now engaged to the most brilliant woman and finding new ways to enjoy life each day. When people ask her how she spent this pandemic, she often says that she's been living through COVID with the unexpected rises and falls that come with recovering from an incurable illness. Thank you for, I love you guys for a number of reasons, and we talked briefly, and for those of you that are watching and tuning in, we have a great number of people here. This is so fun. I'm going to learn as much about them as you are. And so I would urge you and encourage you to ask questions. I think we have an opportunity to not only talk about innovative advocacy, I made up that word, but it seemed appropriate here, as well as we have a great opportunity to talk to people with lived experience that are literally just out of residential and have really chosen in a big way to advocate on a national scale and do something just out of treatment and out of therapy and be very vulnerable and real and authentic and raw and all the things. And so I think we have a really wonderful opportunity to tap Maya and Ali's brains and see, where they're at and the decisions they've made and the choices. So please get your questions, load them up. We'll go through. We can ask them as we go. Hi, Nikki Bradley in Dublin, Ireland. How you doing? So you've both, so your experiences are similar in some ways. Is that why you feel like you connected? Because you both were at the residential program together. Is that correct?
Yeah. We were actually roommates, which created this particular connection. And we also both had this sort of lived experience of co-occurring OCD and eating disorder. So there was also sort of like some shared experience even aside from OCD. But I think that the moment that came that like we really bonded outside of just our friendship was when we were attending a group actually in treatment, and we were talking a little bit about like stigma. And that's not really like a super hot topic at the facility that we went to, but this group in particular like really stuck with Maya and I. So kind of the whole rest of the room was like quiet and clearly bored, and Maya and I are like, racing to be like, actually, this is what we think about stigma, and these are our opinions about stigma and how it impacts us and everybody else. And I think that was the day that we were kind of like, okay, like we need to do something with this. We're both clearly in some ways overly passionate about this. And we really kind of want to harness that energy and see where it takes us.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. How did you, I think one of the bravest things people can do, and I talk about this a lot, is advocate either while struggling or in the midst of an episode or treatment, or even just out of treatment and really just finding your footing in all the experiences that you've done. I really began advocating after I had been in maintenance for a little while and really didn't want people to go through what I had been through, but I felt like I was in a really good place. It had been about a year and a half. I wanted to get my feet wet and start presenting. And that was in 2011. So, 9 years later, with social media really in full force and the ability to just have a soapbox anywhere you want, what we'll definitely get into Hard Quirk, but what inspired both of you personally? I'm going to start with Maya because her therapist will think that's a great exposure.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What inspired you personally to sort of decide, honestly, so quickly to be like, okay, you know what? While I'm figuring out my life and figuring out how to move past this and maintain this and figure it out as I go, like why you wanted to advocate and why you wanted to advocate publicly? Because we get that question a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It really was not something I had thought much about before being in treatment for OCD and having that conversation on stigma. And I think when we did have that conversation, it really ignited this passion in me where I was thinking, I went so long without knowing that I was dealing with OCD. I thought genuinely that I was a terrible person, genuinely that I was a pervert, believed that was who I was at my core. And the process of getting the correct diagnosis and being able to share with other people who have been through the same thing, I really felt so strongly that other people needed that as well, and that I could play my own part in kind of helping other people to have that experience that I didn't have or had very late in the process. And I'm a very creative person. I consider myself an artist. I enjoy doing graphic design and painting and everything else under the moon of art. So I figured that since that's a strength of mine, like how can I put that into work for advocacy? And I'd heard of this idea while studying art therapy about art as advocacy. And so I kind of started toying with that idea for how we could do that for OCD. And creativity kind of became a foundational part of Hard Quirk's platform.
Yeah.
I love that, Maya. I mean, and being a creative, also, I relate to so much of that. So just to understand, in your bio, you said it was 12 years until you were officially diagnosed. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So I started having symptoms probably when I was about 8 years old, maybe even earlier, but that was when it was really actually profound. And I got my diagnosis when I was 20. And then I didn't get residential level care until 2 years later.
And it's important to point that out only because we work so hard to decrease the number of years it takes to get diagnosed and treated. But you're literally 20 years younger than me. Oh, excuse me, no, but you are. But I'm putting myself out there to basically say that, your age is still dealing with the same crap that I dealt with, and yes, it's down from 17 years. It's now 12 years or 10 years, and we have to understand that it's a slow process and it's baby steps, but it's important to point out that like there's teens and late teens and early 20s that are still having to wait a decade or more to get treatment. And that's important to say, look, it's still happening. This is still a problem. We have to do something about it, which is why what you're doing is so amazing.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, I've been through treatment for several years beforehand for other things and been through, I think, at least 10 or 12 clinicians before the diagnosis of OCD ever even was an idea. So I definitely felt very passionate about helping decrease that period of time where people go undiagnosed. So.
For sure, Maya. Ali, same question.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been pretty passionate about advocacy, kind of for different areas of life. I've kind of always known that I want to be in the human services, wanting to study humanitarianism, and particularly eventually wanting to get my master's in social work. So kind of that side of things wasn't super new to me, but the experience of OCD was. I was this very driven, very high functioning young student, kind of known for, being willing to take on, lots of projects, having kind of the confidence that I can do anything that I set my mind to. And OCD hit me like a train, kind of out of nowhere, right? It completely destroyed my functionality. So we know that OCD is a really challenging illness. And then there's also these things that layer on top of OCD that don't necessarily have to be there. So those things are like how it hits your self-esteem, how it sort of some of the stigma pieces that we've talked about, so how it impacts your ability to connect with others and then also just like reconnect with the world. We're talking about Suicide Prevention Week. We know that, rates of suicide are fairly high with OCD. We also know that, the illness becomes more dangerous the longer that it goes undiagnosed and untreated. And I know that's something that Maya and Ethan both touched on. So kind of like I was having all of these thoughts, right? So for that first kind of year and a half of experiencing OCD, I genuinely believed that I was going insane. I thought that I was experiencing psychosis, which then became one of my obsessions and my fears. Yeah. The times. Yeah. And, you know, I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm not the strong, determined young person that I thought that I was. I am completely destroyed. There is no coming back from this. And then whenever I got to OCD treatment, I was like, wow, so that was catastrophizing, right? There's all of these other people who experience the exact same intrusive thoughts, the exact same rituals. And I still learn new things every single day from this community that we are so privileged to serve. You know, we have this opportunity to learn from you guys all the time, and that's healing and bonding and all these good things. So I think that for me, like that realization, I was like, okay, there needs to be more. This is not like there needs to be more. I don't ever want anybody to feel that the way that I felt over the course of that year, sort of struggling and truly disappearing in silence.
Yeah, you lose your identity. You lose who you are. You're just existing. I remember the therapist telling my parents, like, you've already lost your son, you know, even though I was still alive. So, and I relate about the psychosis. I was at a psychiatric hospital and they diagnosed me as psychotic. Said, oh, your son doesn't have a psychotic, because I believed the thoughts to be so real. And they were like, so I totally relate to that. And doesn't it feel like, as an advocate, and especially I feel this every minute, which is why it can be stressful to be an advocate, is like every minute for somebody struggling feels like years, you know. And it's very hard to navigate as someone who wants to help and reach out to somebody, because you know that struggle. You know, you may not know exactly what they're going through, but you know the OCD struggle and how it feels in the moment.
Yeah, and I love how you also touched on this kind of multi-generational experience of OCD and the lack of knowledge around it. So something we talk about a lot at Hard Quirk is like the fact that, you know, and we're so thankful for this, but many types of like mental illnesses have actually grown a ton of recognition and understanding over the past, 10 years, right? So there are like a lot of illnesses that 10 years ago, nobody really knew anything about. And over the past 10 years, there's been a lot of openness, a lot of sharing and experience, and that has brought so much awareness. And for whatever reason, OCD is completely excluded from that. I know for me, prior to my personal experiences of OCD, I knew little to nothing about the actual experience of the disorder. So that was also, I think, something that we were kind of like, yeah, that needs to kind of have attention called to it, I guess. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I want to tell everybody, get your questions ready. You guys are getting some great love and lots of great comments, and I'll go over some of them, but I encourage you to read them maybe later for sure. So with that in mind, let's dive into Hard Quirk a little bit. And so let's start at the beginning, because I know if you guys, we posted the link in the website, we will post it again. The website is super impressive. And this is me, nobody's telling me to say any of these things. I think these anyway. So I get really excited about people like Ali and Maya. And I think that, they're the future of advocacy, and, they're where and are poised to make such big differences and carry on the torch from, us old people. So, no, but all kidding aside, okay. So you guys are sitting at the residential program, and tell us how Hard Quirk was birthed, because there's so many ways. Where did this idea come from? And then follow that with, what is Hard Quirk? What does that even mean?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah.
Hit it.
So yeah, in that conversation about the stigma around OCD, something came up that was really jarring to me in particular. We were talking about how rituals and compulsions that we find to be very disturbing, life disrupting, very time consuming, like they get written off as being quirks, or being that we're just quirky people. And, prior to hearing that, I didn't really have that experience so much, because I struggled with more of like pure obsessional type things, or my rituals were mental rituals, essentially. And yeah, I was thinking, like, how can we kind of take that term and make it something positive? Because earlier on, I had thought of quirkiness as kind of a positive thing, something that was really empowering for me. I had one clinician who had given me the treatment goal of embracing your quirkiness. And this was at a time when I was getting out of treatment and I was actually starting college at the time, and kind of figuring out and navigating how to start living a life outside of treatment and what that would look like, and what my interests actually were outside of the life that I'd been living in hospitals for a few years at that point. So fast forward to when I was hearing all this stuff about quirk being a negative thing for OCD, and that people's experiences were just flat out invalidated by that term. I wanted to see how we could reclaim that and make it something that empowers people rather than, forget the word that
invalidating.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a lot of it, right? And then there's also this element of Maya and I being like best friends, right? And so something that we found a lot in treatment was this like really fairly borderline inappropriate dark humor that we would utilize all the time. So we took this like super candid comedic approach, and I think it was quite popular, and it ended up kind of drawing the attention, I think, of like counselors and clinicians, and it became this thing, this way of coping that we became really accustomed to. And so we were thinking about how absurd and how ridiculous it feels and is to the outsider when we're doing ERPs, which is exposure and response prevention, the gold standard treatment for OCD, just in case anybody isn't kind of familiar with that term. So a lot of them are like really silly, right? So for Maya, she's often like shouting obscenities and things like that out the window at strangers. And for me, sometimes I was like rolling around in a wheelchair, like drinking a smoothie that had 420 painted on it. So it's just like these very odd things that, like, if you don't know OCD, and certainly if you don't know us, would definitely be considered very quirky. So we kind of thought of how we could take quirkiness from being called quirky for our rituals, and then instead being called quirky for our recovery.
Yeah, definitely. I love what you said about it coming out of our ERPs, actually, because there were so many wild things that we were doing. I was driving around in my car, rolling the windows down and shouting penis at people.
Absolutely.
And that was my ERP. And, other people who are probably on the receiving end of that are like, what? But, so these things are very quirky, but that is how we are actively getting better.
Yeah. It's like quirky in that, instead of quirky in retracing our steps or tapping something, however many times, or finding the safe number, or whatever the ritual might be. We want to be quirky for our recovery instead of quirky for our rituals.
And I think
I love that.
Like, how can we have fun with this too at the same time?
I mean, because you gotta, right? Like, this is incurable. It's lifelong. There is no cure for it. Certainly we can recover and we can be well and we can live a great life. And like, it's going to be here, kind of forever. So like, at some point you have to have fun with it.
I used to tell a story about when I first started treatment, and I was both simultaneously afraid that I was accidentally going to hit my head and cause a brain bleed, and accidentally drink Clorox and poison myself. And so they had me hold, those little cheap Dixie cups that come at the water. And so they had me put some Clorox in one and then a cup of water under the other and hold it, because the bottoms of those Dixie cups would get flimsy really fast. And so I had to hold the Clorox over the Dixie cup. And then I had to walk outside, and at every palm tree, I had to stop and bang my head on it 10 times. And this was like in a public mall area where the office was. So I was like, for a moment in the middle of my misery, I would stand there and go, I wonder what people are thinking right now as they're watching me like hit my head on this palm tree and hold these 2 cups of whatever. So you're absolutely right. It's super quirky. And why isn't it okay to embrace treatment? Why isn't it okay? The thing that makes what you guys doing so, and I guess innovative came to mind. And I don't know where you're coming from or your stance or your journey. But it's this idea of, it's so easy for us as advocates and even myself is to go in and go like, don't use OCD. Don't call it quirky. Don't do that. I need to re-educate you compassionately. I've always talked about compassionate education, but I need to go in and redefine this for you, because you can't call it a quirk, And I love this concept of like, we're going to meet you where you are, and we're going to acknowledge, yeah, there are quirky aspects to this, but it's not necessarily what you think, and let's have a conversation about it. Instead of let's try to reprogram the whole world into not using a word that's so already entrenched vernacular. I love this. So I don't know, like, yeah, I'm so curious where that came from. This idea, is that just how you approach life? Is like, let's just be inclusive and like figure it out together. And like, I'm so fascinated by.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were so excited when we saw that you named this Innovative Advocacy. I love that you kind of came up with that name on your own, because we feel so much like that has been our experience. Like you said, we're fresh out of treatment. This is like deeply uncomfortable for us, right? Neither of us like public speaking. Certainly neither of us really like being emotionally vulnerable, and like putting out our literal worst fears. And I think that like there is this experience of like learning as we go, and we have learned to embrace that uncertainty, right? That's kind of an OCD term, but that is something that we've learned a lot. Like, it is innovative in its own way because we have no background, no experience in, creating a nonprofit or a foundation or anything like that. We're learning as we go here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's all.
I would add to that, I mean, like, for any movement, really, like, you're going to need many people's involvement. You can't just kind of cater to one particular group, or, but you also can't cater to everyone. So it's like, how do we navigate that and use our strengths? And when I think about the OCD community, I think a lot about creativity, actually, because we're always, making these very strange connections. And whether or not you call yourself an artist, or it's visual arts, or do music or anything, like, your brain is innately like very creative. And so how can we use that as a strength, and kind of work our way forward with those things?
And to your point, OCD is creative. How do we compulse and reassure ourselves? The things that we come up with to satisfy OCD are incredibly creative. So what's beautiful about creativity, it doesn't necessarily have to specify, piano, music, photography, singing, dancing, acting. There's a variety of ways. And Dr. Grayson talks a lot about this, how, the three things OCD sufferers have in common are above average intelligence, above average creativity, and vivid imagination. So, how do we harness that for good? And the reason I call this innovative advocacy is this idea of, so we get so many people coming to the foundation and emailing and coming on this and go, how can I get involved? That's the number one question. How can I get involved? And I did the same thing. We need opportunities. How can I do it? What can I do? And then, throughout the year, somebody will pop on our radar. It's like, oh, there's a 15-year-old that's publishing his own book and wants our help, or just something out of nowhere. And something that I love about you, and there's tons of people that are doing it, and there's no right or wrong way to get into advocacy. I went up to the foundation and went, hi, is there something I can do? So that was my path, right? But at the end of the day, it's absolutely amazing with the tools that we have with social media and programming and software and just ingenuity and smarts and intelligence, what you can create, on your own, and just start doing what you love in a passionate way and really make an impact to where people go, hey, look over there. What are they doing? I want to talk to them. And what made you, where did that drive come from to say, like, we need to do something? Obviously partnerships, but we need to do something. This is missing.
Where did that come from?
I mean, a lot of it was honestly our own experiences, right? Like, we try to be super transparent. So yes, like, we are the advocates, and anybody who is a part of Hard Quirk are the advocates. Anyone who is a member on our website, anyone who submits anything, likes things, comments things, anybody who, even supporters, which is like such a big part of our community, anybody who's willing to like interrupt that social process when they hear somebody say, like, I'm so OCD, being like, oh, actually, like, my daughter has OCD and this is what her experience is like, right? Like, anybody who's willing to do that can be an advocate. And our community is mostly about creating the platform for that to exist, because like you said, like, it's missing. And we noticed that right away. Like, when we got out of treatment, we were kind of like, where are we supposed to go? We have no, there's no like circle, there's no recovery oriented community. And that could be really, really helpful.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead, Maya.
It definitely came out of some place where it was something that was missing, and we were leaving treatment around the same time. I was a little bit later, but we were like, yeah, there's there's nothing out there for this to kind of keep us going after we leave treatment. So let's build it ourselves, honestly.
Yeah. And I mean, also just adding that like relapse rates are also fairly high, right? Like we want to create something that is sustainable. And it almost feels like embracing your quirkiness can be like a lifestyle option for you to sort of allow that tolerance of uncertainty, allow that courage to bleed into different aspects of your life.
Absolutely. I mean, it's almost like, for a long time, it wasn't cool to be called a geek or a nerd or, and now like there's a geek nation. It's cool to be certain things. And why can't it be cool to be quirky? And I think it can be cool to be quirky right now. It can be cool to be quirky regardless. But I think when you use it in conjunction with mental illness, people get real uncomfortable to have that conversation and be like, oh, that maybe sounds insensitive. But you bring a comfort and an ease to this idea that, that what we have to do to get better is quirky. And there are aspects of OCD that are quirky. And it's okay to acknowledge them, both as a sufferer and someone who is observing OCD or says, hey, that's a little strange. It's okay to say, yeah, it's really strange. It's totally strange what we have to do. Listen to what I had to do last week and embrace it. It's such a great way to engage. All right. So Hard Quirk, we now know sort of what that means. Tell us about the website and all the things that you're doing.
You glitched for just a second. Would you mind just repeating that question? We didn't quite get it.
Yeah, sometimes, it's so frustrating. I was basically like, we've identified Hard Quirk and what that means. I'd love to know now, like, tell us about the movement, the website, everything that you've got going on. I know there's people asking if you're holding support groups. So give us an overview of Hard Quirk, the movie.
Yeah. I mean, it has accelerated so much more quickly than we anticipated. We're so excited. So yeah, we have a lot going on right now. The kind of almost foundation or the core is our website. So that's www.hardquirk.com. I think it's somewhere in the chat box if you're willing to like scroll for it. And on that website, we have a lot of things. So Maya, as you've heard, is a brilliant graphic designer. She loves compliments, and she has created really this like the most fantastic community, right? So we were able to kind of like blend our ideas. We have sections for like kind of written publications. So you can read a lot of all different types of creative writing. So particularly memoirs, but also like poetry and things like that, most of which are about OCD and or just like balancing living real life with OCD. We have spaces for contact, of course. So do, feel free to share anything with us. We have a forum, which is supposed to sort of facilitate conversation on various topics around recovery. What am I missing here? Oh, we have like information as well as resources, information on ourselves as well as our other two teammates, Mira and Sarah, also both have firsthand lived experience. So we kind of have a lot going on specifically on the website platform. Mm-hmm. And then we also have our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. On Instagram, we try to do kind of these like weekly social or community engagement pieces. So on Thursdays, we do #Intrusive Thought Thursdays, which is an opportunity for people to submit either anonymously or otherwise their intrusive thoughts. We're hoping both to sort of destigmatize the content of the thoughts, as well as to create a community around like experiencing those. And then on Sundays, we do #SudSundays, which is almost like a community ERP. And something that we really tend to like emphasize with these activities is that supporters can be involved. Really, anyone can be involved, right? We know that all people experience intrusive thoughts. People with OCD tend to cling on to them or to create associations. They tend to kind of attach meaning to them unintentionally. But everyone does experience intrusive thoughts. And then for Sud Sunday, anyone can get their suds up. So we ask supporters to kind of get involved with that as well. We are creating some groups on Facebook. As you mentioned, we definitely do have some support groups going on right now. I'll let Maya talk a little bit more about that. And anything else that I'm missing? Oh, go ahead.
There is a lot that we're doing right now. For the support groups, we're actually hosting 3 different groups. So we have one for the supporting community. So parents, partners, siblings, loved ones, whoever considers themselves a supporter, that is a group where you guys can go and talk about those experiences and get some support it's like a peer-led support group actually. And We also have one of those groups for people with lived experience. And then we also have a combined group, which serves more as like a workshop type of space.
We let our like comedic and creative flag fly on Monday nights. So
Yes.
definitely join us for Zoom sessions for weird things.
Yes, but that one's a
I want to come to that.
supporters and those with lived experience to come together and kind of talk about the same topics. And both, it's like an informational, educative space as well as just a place to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. And tomorrow we actually have our very first Hard Quirk newsletter coming out. So big things there. That will be released monthly. And then we are just sort of in looking to the future. We're hoping to collaborate with some other advocates as well to do some like specialized art projects. I know Ethan has already connected us with some great people. And we're also hoping to, at some point, create some other type of like peer support. Yeah, so lots of things on the horizon.
We also have,
And I think,
oh yes, we also have video projects, which
yes,
Allie.
everything.
No, go ahead. I was just glad Maya had your back on that because you were going to forget. So
I was totally gonna forget.
Yeah. We've got one video that we already published. It's up on YouTube. It's called OC Diaries. And that was a compilation of different people with lived experience sharing their stories, small tidbits of it, and kind of talking about the stigma and how it's impacted them. Very powerful piece. I would definitely recommend. It's definitely quirky as well.
Stay tuned for Maya crying midway.
Yeah, it's a good time. Yeah.
And here's the
also do more video projects in the future. So.
Yeah.
And here's the beautiful thing, and I firmly believe this, and I've said it a million times before, is that there's never too many advocates. There just aren't. There's never much. There's never enough. And at a certain point, different people doing different things with a common goal, which is educate, reduce stigma, make access to treatment affordable, effective, all of those things, right? But doing them in ways that speak to different people. And it's like we have, I don't know if Morgan's on, but Molly's here from Not Alone Notes, two powerhouse women that are doing awesome things. Sean with Draw Your Monster, Margaret with Riley's Wish, Chrissy at Game Changers, the IOCDF, Peace of Mind Foundation. There's so many people, and the reality is we can all coexist and should coexist because one person isn't going to resonate with everybody. We all, especially with OCD, because yes, OCD is OCD is OCD. We understand that, and the content doesn't necessarily matter, and the subtypes are, but it doesn't really matter with treatment. At the same time, that's the entry point. You're going to get somebody's attention when you speak to somebody's subtype, what they're dealing with. Hey, I have that thought. Oh my God, I didn't know that anybody else had that. I want to connect with you. So the question then becomes, how do you connect with those people? What are you doing to engage those people? And at a certain point, I hope there's so many of us around that suddenly people are being bombarded everywhere, because we're going to eventually meet in the middle and just hopefully congeal into some massive movement, which I hope happens, in the very, very near future. And so, what you're doing is really, really exciting. And I told this to you when we first talked. I loved it beyond, and I'm not in any way minimizing people who run just Instagram accounts, but I love just the robust nature of what you're doing. I love the fact that it's not just weekly posts or daily posts or Insta stories, that you're creating a community like No CD has done and Health Unlocked has done and other people, but you're coming from your perspective. And your perspective, and that's what's beautiful about lived experience, is that it's unique and it's special and it's true and it's real and it's yours, right? And no one else can offer what you offer, and that's what makes what you do so special. And that goes to anyone that advocates, right? Nobody else can offer that. Nobody can offer your own personal journey, and so that's why these things are so powerful. That's why they resonate with the people that are really struggling. So yeah, you guys are awesome. I let's get to some questions. Feel free to, there's some already questions loaded in. Feel free to load in questions as well. And then I'm gonna drop what I call truth spears on you. Because I now feel protective of you. And so I want to tell you some things as an advocate to just watch out for, because it can be stressful. And so yeah.
All the
Yeah. So, but first, so Megan Feely at 7:18 p.m. says, this is such a great question. We get this question a lot. How did you know you were ready to share your OCD story with others?
Yeah, Megan, so good to hear from you, by the way, as a side note. Yeah, I mean, I noticed that question, so I already have an answer. I'll go first. So the answer is like, I didn't, and I don't, right? Like, I have no idea if I'm ready to share my experience. I have no idea if I'm qualified to share my experience. I certainly make mistakes in sharing my experience, and even OCD has attached itself definitely to that process, right? So I will routinely kind of be like, what if I'm lying? Right? What if I'm embellishing? What if I don't even have OCD? These are like fairly common, I think, intrusive thoughts that come up for me. And I think that just like we learned in treatment and just like we try to practice every day, it's kind of like if we wait until we're ready, like that day may never come. So for me, I knew that it was like this experience, like I need to just jump.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Maya?
For me, I'd say that, I mean, I never feel ready. I don't think I will ever feel ready, and I'm doing it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I think what really kind of led me to start sharing my story was just when I realized that so many other people out there are struggling with the same things that I've struggled with and don't know that they're struggling with this, and they attached it to their core identity like I did, thinking that they're terrible and just really lacking self-love to any degree. And yeah, I just wanted to be able to, like, if putting my most vulnerable stories out there can help someone else get help and learn to love themselves a bit more and cut themselves some slack, then I'm beyond happy to do that, because I don't want someone else going through what I went through. And the truth is that there are people going through that as well, and don't know it.
Do you also feel it helps give purpose to everything that you've been through?
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. I mean, starting Hard Quirk has been such a great thing for me. Like, I never would have expected that in my 20s I would be starting a nonprofit foundation for OCD advocacy. Never thought that. But yeah, it's ignited this huge passion in me to just start sharing those things in order to help others.
Yeah. I think that and you said, thank you, Megan, for the question. I think you nailed it. You know, it's like, I had that moment where it's like, if I don't, who is? Which I think we hear a lot about in all kinds of sexual harassment and molestation. And, you know, I'm not talking about subtypes, I'm talking about the actual experiences. People are like, well, if I don't talk about it, who's going to talk about it? And I definitely had those moments, and I had people say, oh, don't share that about yourself because that could come back to bite you. And it's like, yeah, but like, I have to, because I haven't seen it before, and all that stuff. And, you know, I think that if you take a community first approach to your advocacy, where you're really all about helping others, you know, and that's where you're coming from, I don't think there is a wrong. You're human. We're going to be, you know, we're fallible. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to say the wrong thing. Not everybody's going to love us. We're going to get hard emails occasionally, or people questioning what we're saying. But at the end of the day, staying true to who we are and why we're doing what we're doing, and the honesty and the vulnerability and the rawness in which we share our stories is ultimately what impacts the community. And 90.9% of the people will resonate with that, see what you're doing, and greatly appreciate that. So the follow-up question is, I know that, you know, it has long, but how's your experience been with opening up so quickly, especially just out of treatment? Have you found lots of support? Have you been stigmatized? What's the experience been?
So both,
Yeah.
A hard both, right? Okay, I'll speak for me and let Maya speak for Maya, but I've received so much support. It's unbelievable how much support that I've received, particularly people that like are not a part of the OCD community that I already know, who have come to me and been like, I actually have this intrusive thought, or I've wondered if I struggle with this, you know, and I really, you know, thank you so much for sharing this. This is so vulnerable. I appreciate it. You know, particularly when we post like our intrusive thought Thursdays, because my thoughts are like ridiculous. So it's like kind of like, yes, I've received this like unbelievable amount of incredible support, and that's been so empowering. And on the other hand, it's weird. So when I'm like looking for a job, for example, and I know that employers will find my Facebook and they'll see that, that's, you know, a stigma. That's a risk that I have to be willing to take. You know, I mentioned in my bio, like I'm engaged to the most brilliant woman, right? So like her family members, her friends, like you know, our lives, both hers and mine, become sort of public and on display. And that's been really, really challenging. So I think that there's like, just like everything else, there's like this really strong dialectic experience of really, really wonderful and incredible, you know, kind of feedback, and then also really hard stuff too.
What about you, Maya?
You know, honestly, I'm forgetting the question because I'm anxious.
Yeah. So he basically asked, what has the experience been like of starting Hard Quirk and like sharing our stuff so soon after treatment?
Yeah. It's wild.
It is.
I'm not sure what exactly to say about it, but yeah, we've been met with such great support from people. You know, I think when people are vulnerable, it really opens a huge window for others to connect. And that's been a very powerful experience for me to have people reaching out and saying, like, this has been a huge help to me, even if there are people who don't struggle with OCD in particular, but just any mental health issue in general. Like, to have someone open up has, as I've gotten feedback, been very helpful for them. And that's always motivating for me. In particular, like sharing my story, I've found it to be very helpful for my recovery. I mean, it's like constant ERPs, building Hard Quirk. I'm constantly writing about my experiences. I wrote a piece called A Prepubescent Slut, in which I talked all about growing up as a child with intrusive sexual images and such. So it's constantly requiring a lot of courage and a lot of vulnerability. And I'm learning to love that.
It's growing on us.
Yeah, it's definitely hard, and like, it's just so rewarding, I'm finding.
Yeah. A doctor. Go ahead, Allie.
No, you, please.
No, it's all, people have heard enough of me, trust me. Go ahead.
No, I wanted to also say, like, there's this weird sense of solidarity that I've also gotten from like the supporting community. So I'm thinking of like parents, sisters, friends, loved ones, spouses, etc. Where when as they have heard our story again and again in great detail, and, you know, seen our intrusive thought Thursdays and our sad Sundays, where there becomes this recognition for the amount of courage that is required to just living with OCD every day. And I've had, you know, people that I thought would never understand my experience say, like, I don't know how you do what you do. I don't know how you do ERPs. Like, it has to be the most terrifying thing in the world. I couldn't do what you do. And there's something that's so healing about that, and so honoring about what has been a really horrifying experience, that it feels like almost this like step of solidarity. And that's been kind of a unique, I think, thing that like I never expected to get from this process of Hard Quirk. That was really, really gratifying for me.
I relate to so much of what you're saying, and I mean, if I would have been so public so quickly right out of the gate, although I was so busy living life. But what I was going to say is, you know, one of the most well-regarded doctors in our field, Dr. Janicki, he told me early on when I was still at treatment, he's like, you know, and I've said this a gazillion times, is, you know, the best thing you can do for your OCD is help others. And it is literally the most true statement that has ever been, regardless of therapy or medication or whatever. Literally the best thing I can do myself every day in my OCD and anxiety is help other people. And you know, that is so true. But what I'll also tell you, and what it sounds like is like, you know, you worry about putting stuff out there, if it's going to come back, what it means, and this living in sort of this, you know, really intense uncertainty. But what's amazing is when you discover this idea of the greater good and why you're doing what you're doing and why you're doing it for, suddenly any negative repercussions that happen acting from your truest and most honor instincts to help others sort of become irrelevant. Yes, I might not get a job, or somebody may judge me or whatever, but like, I'm operating from the most honest place to make sure that nobody else goes through what I went through. And suddenly some of those negative things that may or may not happen are really worth it, because at the end of the day, it's about the greater good, and it's much bigger. The movement and what we're doing is much bigger than ourselves.
Yeah. No, I love that you said that. I mean, I feel inspired after that.
No, you know, so, and, you know, I talk about all the time. I mean, for me, it was dating got really weird when I came out, because before, if you Googled my name, all my acting stuff would come up, and I was just out to LA, and like suddenly the more public I got in advocacy, you know, I'd meet a girl online, and then we talk once, and then the next conversation she'd be like, so I Googled you, and why were you in a psychiatric institution? I'm like, oh, that, yeah. But like you said, 9 times out of 10, the conversation is, well, you know, I've had this, or a family member or a friend, you know, and you end up making a connection. You know, I can count on one hand the amount of times that I've had a negative reaction to that situation. Question for Allie. This is at 7:19 p.m. about contamination OCD plus possible eating disorder. How would you know when to seek help for the ED side of things? Do you wish you got help sooner dealing with ARFID weight loss, contamination OCD, and metaphobia in my 14-year-old son?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm so sorry to hear that you're kind of struggling with that. That, you know, not something that I would wish on anyone. Like, we've talked about OCD, how it can be dangerous and life-threatening in a variety of ways. But I think that any type of like eating issues are one of the most life-threatening things. And I know I certainly experienced that kind of instability. So in terms of identifying what's eating disorder and what's OCD, I can't, and I've stopped trying because it became a form of rumination, where I was kind of always trying to decide, like, is this eating disorder related or is it OCD related? And the reality is, it really doesn't matter. The kind of reality of recovery is that ERP works for both. So the answer is pretty much to always do what makes me uncomfortable. Not always the answer like I want to hear, but it's kind of the one that I know in my heart at this point. In terms of, so I was actually initially diagnosed with ARFID, and I went to eating disorder treatment first because.
Can you define what ARFID is? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I don't remember what it stands for, but it is an eating disorder, a type of eating disorder that's typically associated with being about, like, the most common form is sort of that fear of choking. So there's like this fear of choking when you're eating. It causes you to significantly restrict the amount of food that you eat, and thus ARFID. It's not only about choking, but that's primarily the thing. So ARFID's almost like set aside from other eating disorder types because it's a little bit different. And you can see, even with that fear or that example, like how easily that bleeds into OCD. They're very, very much overlapping. I can also just Google, because I really would hate to not be able to give you guys an actual definition of ARFID. Oh, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, you know, in terms of dealing with that, you know, I'm so sorry to hear that, again, that you're kind of struggling with that. The eating disorder treatment, unfortunately, wasn't long-term effective for me. It wasn't sustainable because I wasn't addressing that OCD piece. And another unfortunate thing is that, like, right now, it's been really, really challenging to find treatment that's effective for both. And that's kind of the reality. But certainly, your son is not alone. And it's a very common, you know, the comorbidity of eating disorders and OCD, they're the two most commonly co-occurring anxiety disorders. Maya and I, both co-founders of Hard Quirk, have that experience, and it will always be a piece that's kind of woven into Hard Quirk.
So I just learned that I had ARFID as a kid, and I had no idea. And if my mom's watching, she'll be like, "Oh my God!" So I don't talk about this often, but and say with Maya and Allie, but when I was 7 years old, I sneezed at an Astros baseball game. This is the 1980s, back in the day, and I choked on whatever gunk was in my throat, and then I was afraid something was stuck in my throat, and I felt like it was stuck in my throat. It was always going to be stuck in my throat, and I'd already been showing obsessive-compulsive, you know, tendencies and things, although there was no diagnosis for that, you know, so I was just creative or whatever. But at that point, everything I ate, I was afraid I was going to choke on. So I completely restricted everything I ate to either chicken broth or mashed potatoes. And if my parents or grandparents to eat anything with substance, they would have to put it in a blender and completely pulverize it, and then I would drink it. And I did this. I lost a ton of weight, and I was afraid to eat everything. And then, because ironically, So then we went to a bunch of ENTs specialists who diagnosed me with tonsils, inflamed tonsils. I had my tonsils out. And apparently, like in my brain, that went, okay, that was it. That fixed it. And I never had the problem again. And so, but that's literally what you're talking about.
That's absolutely 110% what I'm talking about. Yeah. I like that your OCD was like, okay, tonsils fixed it. I'm going to latch on to something else now.
Oh, totally. It went on to so many other things. It was like, okay, that must have worked. That's clearly what it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, so wow, who knew? I can't wait to discuss this with my parents because there you go. Okay, well, see, you learn something every day. Thank you, Hard Quirk, for a new diagnosis. Okay. Kristen Moore wrote, "You girls are so strong and courageous. Thank you both for being so vulnerable and sharing your stories." Also, Lyndall, I didn't want to jump over your question. If you have additional questions or you want to seek more information for your 14-year-old son, you can always email the IOCDF at info@iocdf.org. You can also feel free to email Allie and Maya, right, at Hard Quirk. We'll put their email address up on the comment thread, and you can continue to follow up with Allie and Maya as well. Yeah. Sarah says, 721, do you guys host support groups? You talked a little bit about that. Do you want to give us some more details on support groups?
Sure. Yeah. So we host a support group for those with lived experience of OCD every other Thursday.
So this Thursday. So tomorrow, September the 3rd, is firsthand lived experience. Yeah.
And then on the off weeks, we do a support group for the supporters. So family, siblings, etc. And then on Monday nights, we do that combined group in which we kind of talk about different topics in more of like an educational, like psychoeducational space, healthcare, so stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to Thursday night. I want to get dark and humory. I'm excited about that.
Please join us. We love that. Like, particularly in a support group setting, which is much more kind of intimate than this is, we get so crazy. We get so carried away. We love it. I just want to mention this, unfortunately it's not in of course. So I want to make sure that we're super clear. So our support groups, every service that Hard Quirk provides is completely free. We hope to keep things that way. We have some ideas for, fundraisers and other things like that we really, really want to keep things as accessible as possible. So it will always be free or at a very low cost. And that is the case for the support group. So anybody is welcome to join.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you. Caitlin Stowe wrote, "So thankful for finding this foundation. It has taught me so much about my disorder." Mm-hmm. It could be your foundation or my foundation. I'm not sure, but we'll just say thank you, Caitlin. Yes, both. We're working together for sure. There's lots, for those of you, please ask questions away. I'm just scrolling down here. There's lots of good links to both Hard Quirk and IOCDF. Nicole wrote, "I'd love to connect with Hard Quirk as an art therapist with OCD." So Nicole, we'll definitely connect you with their website. You can contact them through their website as well as their email address, which we'll put. And I'm sure they would love to talk. So for sure, that's awesome, Nicole.
We'll find all of your strengths and use them.
No, yes. Love Lana wrote, "You girls are doing so much with lots of worship hands." I agree. So here's a question. PK at 7:43 p.m. wrote, "If you had been treated by an individual therapist outside of residential, do you think you would have experienced similar outcomes? Did some things you learned make more sense after treatment?" Good question.
Yeah, and we have very different answers, I think. Maya and I do. So it's a very good question. Okay, cool. So unfortunately for me, by the time that I even got to residential treatment, my OCD was so severe and out of control that being treated by like a kind of a clinician, even on like a multiple times a week basis, unfortunately, I don't think would have yielded the same outcomes. So I was experiencing rituals at 12 plus hours a day. I had rituals in, almost literally every behavior, every thought that I had. And so, we talk a lot about this idea of OCD and rituals spreading like wildfire. And that was exactly how I experienced it. And it was sort of starting new fires so quickly that between my pretty intensive team of like eating disorder specialists and an outpatient OCD therapist, unfortunately, we just were not able to get it even remotely under control. Yeah, I think that like definitely most things that I learned made more sense after treatment. Everything that I learned made more sense after treatment, particularly about my like own experiences and my own thoughts. Yeah, I think that was kind of my experience. How about you? Oh, yeah.
I was just gonna say, because after treatment is where you actually get to apply what you've learned. So it suddenly becomes, it's out of the bubble of residential. So that makes total sense. Maya, how about you?
For me, I was doing outpatient ERP with a behavioral therapist before I went to residential treatment for OCD specifically. And I definitely could have kept going with that alone. However, I think it would have been a much slower process. I think being in residential treatment was really where a lot of the symptom reduction happened and much quicker than I could have done outpatient. And I'm grateful for that. I'm also grateful for a lot of the stuff that I was able to learn in residential treatment because, you know, everything is, you know, beginning of the day to the end of the day, you're learning about these things. And it's not just once or twice a week for an hour. So it was very immersive and helpful for me when I was in a particularly bad space with my OCD. I think if it's definitely dependent on where you're at with your OCD and how disruptive it is at the time. But
yeah, and I mean, I think that like I know I experienced mine as so disruptive, right? Like I wasn't eating, I wasn't showering, I wasn't caring for myself, I was not functioning as an adult human, unfortunately. And so I think that like for me, it was this like kind of, I needed that quick halt of like, okay, we need to get this under control immediately. And it sounds like for Maya, and tell me if I'm wrong, but like it sounds like for Maya was a little bit more of like, this is the most efficient approach.
Yeah, for me, it was like I was still functioning fine, but I was exerting so much energy in my everyday that it just didn't make sense to continue going like that. And getting more treatment in a more intense space was what was necessary to kind of help me out of that.
And while I don't have certainty, it's entirely possible that had neither of you gone to residential, we wouldn't have Hard Quirk.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's it is almost certain that you wouldn't have Hard Quirk.
So, I mean, like, I'm super glad you guys did, for sure. And PK, I think that the experience is definitely, I mean, I also did outpatient before I did residential. And honestly, outpatient prepared me for residential because I know we think of residential as being like, oh, that's where you, if you're really sick, but sometimes, you know, you're sometimes too ill to go and you better and get some ERP under you before you get into that milieu where you have to kind of jive with everybody else. You know, it's all unique. Sometimes intensive outpatient works really well once a week. And, you know, there's no right or wrong because it's all a process. So thank you, PK. Great question. I think we talked about this some with this was the same question. Does the HQ have any events coming up? I think we talked about the support groups. You definitely mentioned some other events. Anything else we need to know about?
Yes. We've got an exciting art fundraiser coming up at the end of this month, which will be in our newspaper that's coming out tomorrow, our newsletter. Yeah. But yeah, so this art fundraiser is going to be called Hard Quirk. It's going to be sort of like an sort of auction, but also just art fair style thing to raise money to continue being able to work on new projects and work towards our 501c3 status. So yeah, we really wanted to take all of the different artists in this community and kind of do something fun with that. So look forward to that. It's going to be a week-long event where different artwork from different artists in our community, so a lot of people with lived experience or who are supporters will be sharing their art for sale. Yeah,
I love that. We'll definitely keep that. Go ahead, Allie.
No, I was just gonna say it'll be like a variety of artwork. So we've got some paintings, we've got some prints, we have some sketches, we even have like some stickers, jewelry. Oh my gosh, we have all kinds of stuff. We're very excited about it. You can look forward to that on, I think, starting September 21st.
The week of the 21st.
Yep.
Well, also, where can people find out about your support groups? Is there a schedule online or social media? Where's the best place?
I'd say social media is probably the best place, and also the website.
We have an events page.
We do have an events page on the website. Needs to be updated though, so for at least the next few weeks.
In process, but yes, you heard it here first.
But yes.
So Megan, I'm going to pose this question to you, but Megan made a great comment. She wrote, thank you, so helpful. I want to share my story, but always feel held back. Maybe I need to take the jump like you said, Allie. So how do you feel? I mean, advocacy, I don't want to answer this question because I answered a lot. How do you feel about what is advocacy to you? And when somebody says, oh, I wish I could do what you do, or I could speak out the way you do, what do you say to that? What's your response? What does advocacy look like in your mind?
I would say that you can.
Yeah.
You can. And I think what we found with Hard Quirk is that we're trying to find an avenue for everyone to do something, and something that's more comfortable, even if it's a very uncomfortable experience for them to be sharing. That's why we have stuff that's writing versus video work versus artwork versus fashion stuff versus a forum versus speaking in sport groups, and just like, how can we use our voice in some way towards this mutual effort? And I think just according to what would be comfortable to you, like any step at all is moving in the right direction,
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And my hope is that like we are so ridiculously like candid and transparent that by the time people finish having a conversation with us, they're like, oh, I can do what they do. Like they're just, up there talking. I can totally do that. Right. We want to be super approachable. We want to make it possible for everybody to get involved in their own way.
And advocacy, look, advocacy is a very personal experience. And I think for those of us with OCD, we tend to think very black and white. So it's like, oh, well, I'm not comfortable on a national stage, so I can't be an advocate, and really, like, I think, there's paths like you took where you just sort of jumped in head first, and you're still yet to experience what this journey might be like. So far, so good. Other people are a little bit more thought out and planned and said, okay, I'm ready for this to be out there and whatever comes my way. But what I always say, and the reality is, you sharing your story with one other person is advocacy. That's advocacy in a nutshell. It's all about one life and connecting with one person. And so anybody that's on here that's asking a question is advocating because somebody is learning from your experience. So advocacy itself takes on many shapes and forms. And by no means do you ever feel like you have to be, front and center on a stage in front of thousands of people to be an advocate. You can advocate in so many ways. There's so many, I'm sure you guys know, there's people on Instagram, some have identified, some are self-unidentified, but they have Instagram profiles or Facebook profiles or groups. There's so many different ways and so many unique ways, especially with social media, to advocate in a way that's comfortable for you. But I will say, as Maya said, that it should be a little uncomfortable. You should start where you're comfortable and maybe take it one step to where it's a little uncomfortable, because that's where the growth happens. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents on advocacy. I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
Yeah, no, of course. And even, like you said, Ethan, even taking it a step further, like kind of what I was referring to earlier, like even as a supporter, like if you're willing to interrupt that process and say like, oh, you have OCD too, or say, actually, my daughter has OCD and this is what that's like even sort of that process is itself advocacy, and that's a part of the movement.
I remember going to the OCDI in 2014 to visit and just spend Christmas Eve and day with the patients, because I was there during Christmas and it was super hard in Hanukkah. Yeah, and it's super hard. And you go to the malls and you go to the outings, and you're like, you see people with their families. You're like, I'm in a mental institution. I mean, we know it's not technically, but it's still, you're like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? And so it's super stigmatizing. So I went, and there was an amazing girl there that I met that was talking to me, and she was really just telling me about her story, and it just had such a profound impact on me, not only in just her journey, but just some personal things that I was experiencing in that moment. But then she said, I want to be an advocate like you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You're advocating right now. Like, you've totally touched my life in a way that, I'm so much better for this conversation. And so that's why I always say, sharing your story just one-on-one is literally advocacy in its purest form, I think.
Yeah.
So
sharing your story in any way.
Yeah, absolutely. Art, and especially like in creative ways. It's just such a cool way to do it too. So Heather Goodwin at 7:48 p.m. says, were you both willing to go to residential treatment or pushed to go by a family member or someone else? I was forced at gunpoint, pretty much, but
yeah, that's fair. For me, I was not forced. It was a decision that I made for myself. It was quite a different experience for me because earlier on I had been struggling with an eating disorder, and it was kind of pertinent that I did go to treatment, and it was pushed by other people. However, this decision to go to residential treatment specifically for OCD was my own choice. And I'm very happy that I made it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such an interesting question because so like to this day, I sometimes, have this thought, but well up to like the first week that I was at the OCDI, I was like, I don't have OCD. I don't think that I have OCD. And everyone else was like, you have OCD. So by the time I was like, all right, you guys, I have OCD, everybody's like, yeah, we know. And I'm so glad that you finally got the help that you needed. So I was not like forced to go, but like Maya, I was actually already in an eating disorder treatment facility, and I transferred from that facility to residential treatment for OCD. And it came to a point where, my clinician said to me in actually a family therapy session with my mom, that they didn't feel that they could help me anymore, that I, needed different types of help, more intensive help, that my rituals were dangerous, and things like that. And so it did become this decision that I made for myself. I don't think anybody in my family or friend group would have any regret around encouraging me to seek that help. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it was primarily self-made.
I'm actually looking for a specific question that I saw earlier, but thank you, Maya. I have a question for you. In your personal journey. So in your 12-year journey between experiencing symptoms and diagnosis, did you have any type of treatment before that? Did you go see regular talk therapy or anything like that?
Yeah. So I started struggling with eating disorder stuff when I was 14 and started getting treatment for that and like talked to people about it for the first time when I was 16. So that's where my mental health care journey started. And I had seen multiple therapists outpatient, with the psychiatrist outpatient, did some IOP programs, intensive outpatient. I also did partial hospitalization programs, was inpatient a few times for depression-related stuff. And yeah, so I'd seen plenty of clinicians, and it had not come up until I was 20 years old.
But you hadn't been diagnosed with OCD until you were 20.
Exactly.
Okay.
And yeah, it was definitely for me because of the sexual intrusive thoughts. And there was definitely some scrupulosity mixed in there. I was terrified of talking. And there was actually a period of time where I was practically mute. I wasn't talking unless I was in school and the teacher called on me, or it was like expected for me to speak. So I definitely significantly struggled with it, but I wasn't talking, and so people didn't really know, and I was too afraid to talk about it because of all the horrible things that could go wrong when I said that I was having sexual thoughts all the time.
Is that when you discovered art? Your ability to express yourself through art rather than verbalize it?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if I've ever quite connected that timeline with my OCD timeline, but no, that'd be really interesting to look at, actually.
Ponder, take the evening.
Yeah.
Well, you helped me with an eating disorder I didn't even know I had until now. So
we gotta help each other out.
Well, and I know that you posed this question to Maya, but like as usual, I have 2 cents as well. That is totally a big reason also that led us to Hard Quirk is like we had both seen, even through the course of my experiencing only like 2 years of OCD OCD untreated and undiagnosed, we had both seen like multiple clinicians. We had both like tried our best to sort of share some of the things that were going on. And the unfortunate truth in a compassionate way is that clinicians even are undertrained and undereducated and really don't know how to recognize OCD and often fall for this thing that OCD does, which is often mask itself as other disorders. Maya had, kind of her issues with like scrupulosity as well as just sort of that social anxiety, and that kept her really quiet. And I really struggled with this issue of magical thinking. So I was like absolutely convinced that like if I ever said any of it out loud or wrote it down, that it would come true.
It would happen.
Yeah, it'd come true instantly. It's like, wow, OCD is so creative in allowing this environment for it to thrive. Because if I can never talk about it, then I will never recover. So yeah, I thought that was like a very interesting kind of perspective too, and just understanding that like even sometimes the people that we're really supposed to trust, like clinicians, even they don't really know enough about OCD.
Yeah, the first time I talked about my sexual obsessions, my therapist actually giggled and laughed. I don't know if it was like she was uncomfortable with the topic or if it was just like the thoughts were so absurd or what, but that completely shot me down right away. And I was like, okay, I am a pervert or a terrorist and I can never talk about this.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The reason I was asking, and I didn't mean to tangent, is that, you know, as I go through this process and try to look at people's journeys, you know, for me, I was diagnosed at 14, but didn't even hear about ERP and the proper treatment until 30, 31. So by the time I got there, I was like, basically, when they said we can help you, I'd heard it 12 other times already with an OCD diagnosis. So I had this massive FU attitude toward the whole thing and had zero hope whatsoever. Then I hear a lot of stories of like, well, I was really struggling for so many years, but then when I got the diagnosis, oh my God, that's what it is. Thank you. And so there's this interesting disconnect between, like, hope still exists, necessarily diagnosed, and still you were 12 years wrong therapist, but when you finally have this label to put on it and this understanding, you know, okay, maybe I can get help. But if you've been diagnosed, gone through this period of time where time and time again you've been promised relief and work, and you just get sicker and sicker and sicker, you start to think you're more broken and more broken and more broken. By the time you reach the place, it's that much harder to get treatment. And I always find that those two journeys are really interesting, because I was thinking about, the reason I asked is like, oh, well, she struggled for 12 years before finding help. You know, why were you so motivated after 12 years? It was because you hadn't really been identified as OCD yet. So just getting that diagnosis was a huge relief. I don't want to speak for you, but is that accurate?
I mean, I was very confused at first. I didn't, because of the stigma, I didn't realize that OCD included sexual intrusive thoughts and whatnot. So I was really confused at first, but I mean, it was very helpful and validating to know that this was OCD finally, and have a direct like pathway for treatment that made sense and could actually be effective after years of things not working.
Quickly, Goro, I don't want to skip over your question. I see your question. I'm not 100% sure it's OCD related. If you want to email the IOCDF, perhaps we can have somebody reach out and help address your question. I just don't feel qualified to diagnose or answer without any more information, but definitely feel free to email info@iocdf.org and somebody will get back to you and maybe we can help direct you in the right place. So thank you, Goro, for asking the question though. Diane, we have time for a few more. Diane wrote, this is going to cover us for a second, but I have a 19-year-old daughter that is just right OCD and has severe avoidance issue. She has been in an IOP program 2 years ago, but I think she needs to go back. Any thoughts on how I can help her get back into the program without seeming pushy? She has made her avoidance issues regarding schoolwork, and we would love to be able to help her recovery packets for classes. Technically, she's an adult, so we need her to step into her own issues, and it cuts it off on the stream. But I'd love, go ahead, girls, take it away.
Yeah, so I mean, this is like, I feel like less OCD related, but very much related to kind of like my experiences of like compassion and like approaching things with curiosity, right? So almost thinking of not wanting, I hear that you don't want to sound pushy and that you don't want to be pushy. And I think that there's a way to be really direct about what you're experiencing and the concern that you're having without being pushy. I think that sort of this skill that Maya and I have learned and talked about, this non-judgmental observation. So being able to say, like, what I'm noticing is this. These are the rituals that I'm noticing. I'm noticing that there are some extra barriers to schoolwork. And I wonder what it would be like to revisit the idea of treatment. Or even something like so simple and curious as like, what do you think? How do you think that things have been going?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely sounds like a compassionate approach to me, and also allows them the space to give their own feedback and kind of self-reflect on how they're doing, and creates that question in or poses that question in a way that can be received as more of something of like, you can get curious about it rather than it's like, oh, my mom or father, whatever parent wants me to do this. This person wants me to do this, and that approach never really feels great, but this curiosity approach can definitely like open the window.
Yeah.
I think Ali and Maya nailed it. And I think that we always want to approach with compassion. I think for parents, it's kind of hard to be afraid to communicate because they're afraid we're going to get a lot of backlash to this idea of compassionate communication and collaboration of, what you're saying without being an OCD police and being seen as like, why are you calling me on this? I know my stuff. I know what I'm doing, and really addressing it from a compassionate place is really good. Also, I'd ask you, like, is she 19, but is she living at home? And are there things that you can do as well to educate yourself there's also slight slow pressures that you can add to help her move forward in ways if she's living at home, and the biggest thing for you is if she's, unwilling to get treatment, get additional treatment, boosters are completely natural. And normal, it's an ongoing, as they said, it's an ongoing process. It waxes and wanes. We all need to step up at times and engage our treatment and our tools and all that stuff. So that's completely normal. But I will say that, if she's against that after you broach it with her, a couple other steps you can take is you can always look into a clinician for yourself. Somebody that specializes in OCD, but take the guesswork out of it. Parents always have to guess. And I always say, don't guess. If your son or daughter isn't willing to go to treatment or therapy to get through it, you go and learn what you can do to help support in a way. Because then the other thing, as I would say, is sometimes just reaching out to other advocates or lived experience. I mean, would your 19-year-old daughter be willing to talk to Ali or Maya or connect, with Hard Quirk and see that, it isn't as stigmatizing as it has to be. And in the conversation with Ali or Maya, or really any advocate, doesn't have to even be about OCD. It's just making a connection, and the OCD will come up on its own, and that will then be a motivator to move forward. So there's just some added things. Maggie asked him, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I just want to say, and Maya and I have already had plenty of like individual conversations with parents as well as like parents' children who are like, actually, I'd really like to talk to Maya because I also have this type of OCD and I'm like really curious about that. Or, with me, who like often it's parents that are, concerned just like you are, where they're kind of like, would you be willing to chat with my kid? And as long as the kid is willing, like I'm always, we're always here for that. That's a very small thing that we can do.
Absolutely. Maggie Schultz asked an important question. Where can people donate?
That is an important question.
We have a donate page up on our website, and that links you to a GoFundMe page. It's as official as we can do right now. But yes, that is the space where people can donate. And then also the art fundraiser that I mentioned is another time where you can donate. That'll be the 21st of September to the 27th. So all of those proceeds from the artwork sales will be donated towards future endeavors for projects for advocacy.
And I think on our GoFundMe and our donate page, we have like written a small blurb about like what kind of different things we're going to use those funds for. And we're always super open to questions, right? We want to make sure to like honor everybody's value. So feel free to just like reach out to us directly if you have any questions about that. Oh,
did mean the art fundraiser.
Nice.
We are still working out the details for how that will, like where the donations will be centered and whatnot. So stay tuned for updates on that.
And we're thinking that it will be like an auction type of situation. Oh, bye, Ethan. So I think Ethan is struggling with his connection a little bit tonight, but we have access to the comments as well. So we can... Oh, cool. Well, Nikki Brantley said, well done, girls. Amazing. Thank you. And I'm noticing that PK said, Ali, it's a shame that early on in your decline while at UNC that you did not know Reed Wilson in Chapel Hill to seek outpatient treatment, but I guess that your journey was the one that you were supposed to take. Yeah, I know. And also Jonathan Abramowitz, which actually like he works in clinical psych. Welcome back, Ethan. And unfortunately, I didn't have access to those resources at the time, so. Oh, there he goes again.
Okay.
Horn
for a more stable Wi-Fi connection.
Oh, there we go.
Cool. I like that we're back on the other side.
Are we back?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You got it.
Let's just keep it like this. I like to change. Oh, it's so frustrating. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on today. Did you guys answer PK's question or about Reed Wilson?
Yeah, it wasn't a question. I just talked to him.
Cool.
But we got a couple new questions. So Renee Robledo, where can I find a link to your support group tomorrow? So we typically post those links on the events on our Facebook as well as on our Instagram. And then you can always contact us directly and we can provide those links as well.
Email or through
yes.
I feel like Allie kicks me off on purpose to just take over.
Hi, this is my show now.
You can have it. You're amazing. We are running out of time. Last question. Is there a way to donate art directly to you?
Ooh,
that's awesome.
You can send an email to Hard Quirk. You can write the email address in here.
That they did.
Okay,
yeah,
it's already in there. Send us an email. We would love to get hooked up with the artwork.
Yeah, especially for the art fair. Yes. We're actually looking for art, so we would love some donated artworks.
I thought you were going to say, especially the masters, Picasso, Angelo. We appreciate those originals. Yeah,
we'll take them.
So unfortunately we're running out of time. I just want to read Maggie's comment. She said, I had a really similar experience in terms of diagnosis to Maya, except harm thoughts. I was convinced I was a bad person who wanted myself or others to die, and nothing made sense until I knew why I had those thoughts. Nikki, our friend in Dublin, who is a frequenter of all the town halls, who we adore, and we're all going to go and have a pint at some point, says, thanks, Ethan, Allie, and Maya. Lots of love here. So I encourage everyone to go through. We are a couple minutes over, but I'm going to hand over some final thoughts to Allie and Maya, and then I'll close out. So final thoughts.
For us?
Sure, why not?
Our final thoughts? Oh, I thought we were expecting you to share final thoughts with us. Okay, sure.
Oh, I don't. It isn't a hard and fast final thought rule. I just figured if there was something you wanted to say just to kind of close out.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the bottom line is we really want to communicate with you all, right? This community is not possible without each and every one of you. We love hearing from you guys. We love, we're honored to sort of have this privilege to serve you in this community. And we want to continue doing that. So just stay in contact, whatever that means for you. And we're really excited about the connections that we can create.
We're always looking for people to share their stories with us. And advocate alongside us, whether that is through writing, speaking stuff, artwork, anything. We want it. We want it because we all need to be together, working together in this effort.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Allie and Maya, for coming on today and telling us, learning all about you individually and Hard Quirk and what you do. I know we're inspired. Everybody can go through. Fran did a killer job of posting literally every link to Hard Quirk's website. So I think this will every individual subdomain is now linked.
I'm so happy.
Yeah. So you can also email them down at the bottom, hardquirkin@gmail.com. They would love to hear from you. So thank you, and Allie and Maya, for being here. As always, I want to thank.
What a pleasure.
We'll have to do a second one. We'll have to get an update.
Would love to.
on all the things. So as always, I want to thank the IOCDF and Fran behind the scenes for doing his digital voodoo. If you haven't already, but you want to be notified about all programming that the IOCDF is having over the next month, be sure to subscribe and follow on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. We're very proud of this image. We like to put it up as frequently as possible. And also check out hardquirk.com and engage with Allie and Maya and see what they're up to. They're doing cool stuff. Also, as long as we're here, I brought up Not Alone Notes. Please be sure to check out them. Molly and Morgan are doing great things. And we should do a town hall with just a ton of different, movements and nonprofits and just go to town. I think that'd be really cool. Anyway, next week is Religious Scrupulosity Volume 2. It's going to be on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. We have a really amazing panel for you, so you want to tune into that. Also, I'll plug Hard Quirk. This always reverses. They have a Zoom group tomorrow, Thursday. There's dark humor. There's probably some inappropriate content. She's going to be screaming other things out the car window. We don't know what's in store. So probably 18 and over or not. And check them out on the website or on their social media. I think I'm going to show up because that sounds super fun. So thank you for spending Thank you for spending your evening with us. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to email the foundation at info@iocdf.org. Until then, until next week, have a wonderful evening. Stay safe, stay vigilant, feel the feels. Don't let OCD off the hook. Thank you, Ali and Maya. And we'll see you next time. Have a good night.
Bye.